Hello viewers and welcome to Top Notch Productions. This is a channel where we discuss issues education, and we have been discussing Fathers of Nations, as you are aware, the Samaritan and the Silent Song. And so far so good. I think our program has been moving on well. We have dealt with quite a number of issues. We have picked parts of the novel and we have tried to demystify those areas that we feel are critical in the interpretation of the text. I am your presenter, Oyuga Z. Omolo. In our today's program, we'll still be talking about examination. We had started talking about examination, and the previous discussion we talked about how to handle English paper 3 that deals with essay and imaginative composition. So far, I took you through the best way to go around essay writing, and I believe that you've watched that clip, and that clip should be beneficial to you and your students. Continue watching our programs, because the more you watch, the more you understand the text, and the more you also understand the nitty-gritties that are required in the interpretation of a text. In our today's program, I would also still like to talk about English paper 2, not paper 3 now, because I had shed some lights on English paper 3. But today, my discussion will revolve around English paper 2. Now, the first thing that you need to know about English paper 2 is the title of the paper. The paper is titled Comprehension, Literary Appreciation, and Grammar. And when you talk about these areas, you need to understand them, because for you to understand probably the content and the distribution of marks, you also need to understand the title of the paper. So this paper is titled, as I've said, Comprehension, Literary Appreciation, and Grammar. I will not talk about comprehension now. Of course, it is 20 marks. That is the first question in this paper. But I would prefer to talk about literary appreciation part of the title. And under literary appreciation, we have two questions. Usually we have question number 2 and question number 3. Now, question number 2 is a question that deals with the literary set books and the compulsory set books, for that matter. Now, for our students, we'll be taking the current set books, or the so-called the new set books, Fathers of Nations, the Samaritan, Silent Song, Artists of the Floating World. For the compulsory set books, we'll be discussing Fathers of Nations and the Samaritan. And we will be discussing how you're supposed to handle question number 2, because question number 2 will actually be testing either Fathers of the Nations, or it will be testing the Samaritan. So for this particular program, I will be dealing with Fathers of the Nation, because it is the compulsory set book, and I believe quite a number of us have read this book, and at this particular time, even if we discuss it, many of us shall have understood the text. Now, let me begin by beginning essay from the compulsory set book, and in this case, Fathers of Nations. Let me define first what is literary appreciation and how it is understood in the examinational context. In a play or in a novel, when we talk of appreciation of a set book, we are talking about those elements that aid you to interpret the text. Now, in any literary text, a novel or a play, we appreciate that text in terms of the plot, that is the order of events in a text, so that the plot should help us to appreciate a text. Number 2 is the stylistic devices that have been used in that particular text should help us also to appreciate the text. Number 3, we have the characters that are used as a vehicle to tell our story and to bring out the themes that the writer or the author may want to put across. So number 3 area of appreciation is the character. Number 4 area of appreciation, the way you're supposed to appreciate a text, is we've talked about the character, we've talked about the theme, we've talked about the stylistic devices, and we also have the plot. So those are the 4 elements that you really need to know when you are appreciating a text. But apart from that, remember, a text is written in a language, so you need to know the language or probably the vocabulary that has been used in the text to bring out the message that the writer would like to put across. So those 4 areas are key when it comes to the interpretation. And I have studied how examination has been set over the years, the national examination and even the mocks that we do. There is a trend, because I'm also a test developer, so I tend to know, to understand how best to come up with an exam paper that is quality and that follows a particular trend. And if you look at the papers that have been set over the years, there is one thing that comes out very clearly, that areas that deal with appreciation, literary appreciation, actually have particular marks that have been given for them since 2006 to date. And that is a trend that I've been able to follow. I've been able to look at it, and probably it helps me now to develop very good papers, quality papers for examination. And you must always allocate at least 17 marks for those areas. My experience tells me that when you look at English paper 2 and the way it has been set over the years, the question on plot is usually given around between 3 to 4 marks. And it comes almost on in every year of examination, because it is one element of appreciation. The second question that has always come in any national examination is a question on style. And the average mark is usually between 4 to 6 marks. That is number 2. Then number 3, we have issues. That is the themes that are coming out in the paper. Usually, if you look at the trend, it is between 2 to 4 marks. Then we also have the question on character, traits and role. And usually, if you check the paper from that time that I've talked about, 2006 to date, the question on the character traits would always be between 2 to 4 marks. So this is the first thing that you need to understand. So if you work it out averagely, you realize that there is usually around 15 to 17 marks that come almost every year, tested every year. And in some schools, you may realize that even the teachers themselves are not aware of this kind of arrangement. And that is why the title of this paper is Literary Appreciation, that section of literature. So how do you appreciate literature? You appreciate literature when you look at the styles, when you look at the themes, when you look at the plot, and the character traits, and the language that has been used. Those 5 areas. If you check at any paper over the years, they will be testing those areas. And the mark that is usually given is between 15 to 17 marks. I hope that is understood. Now, having talked about that, and even the distribution, and I've even given the possible marks that are usually given when they set such areas, we now look at probably a case in Fathers of the Nations. Now, I would want to pick that episode where Fiona Mackenzie interviews Dr. Afolabi over the summit. And maybe that one has been brought in an examination. How does the student or the candidate go around it? I'm talking about that area that begins with Fiona Mackenzie introducing herself to Dr. Afolabi, telling Dr. Afolabi that her parents died while she was young and is been raised by the family of Ian Mackenzie. So there are issues of identity that comes around that place. Then the interview continues until that time that they disagree with Dr. Afolabi because Afolabi feels that Fiona has undermined his book, that is A Failure of States. So assume that you have been given that section, that excerpt, so that you are asked questions. obviously there are certain questions that you expect that will come from that excerpt. The first one that I've talked about is a question on plot. The second one is a question on stylistic devices. The third one would be the question on themes. The fourth one would be the question on character trait and role. And the last one would be the question on vocabulary. So you expect around between 15 to 17 marks coming from that area. Now, you would be asked questions about probably the themes, and you're supposed to bring them out. Now, one of the themes, if you read that part, would definitely be the theme of identity, because in that introduction, Fiona Mackenzie talks about her identity as a Gambian, and she talks about her identity as a black. Of course, she's been raised by the family of Ian Mackenzie. Of course, these are white, but for her, she takes that identity seriously. She doesn't mind what people ask. In fact, she says that people ask a question. There are people, anytime it says that she's Fiona Mackenzie, then people quizzically ask certain things about her, probably because she's black but the name looks white. So she's very proud to be a Gambian, and she's also very proud to be an African. So issues of identity comes up at that particular level. Now, apart from the issues of identity coming up at that particular level, we also have questions of bad governance, because when she interviews Dr. Abiola Afolabi talks about Oyuga that is supposed to be discussed by the presidents. And in that document, we have questions about African leaders rigging elections. We have questions of African leaders having coups every now and again. Whenever there is a takeover and probably handover and takeover, it is usually by coups. So that shows the idea of bad governance. And he also talks about African presidents liking what we call the foul play. And those are questions of governance. And in that case, you can easily identify and illustrate issues of bad governance or poor leadership coming out of that particular excerpt, as I've said. So I'm just giving examples. We are not going to exhaustively discuss these areas. Now, in terms of the theme, there is a dialogue between Dr. Afolabi and Fiona Mackenzie. So a candidate can easily talk about a question on dialogue. And there is also a vivid description how Fiona has been described in that text. You may have to talk about vivid description. Now, there's so many themes that come, styles that come out that you can easily bring out. But what is important, what I'm trying to bring out is the idea that anytime examination is brought, you must always look at these elements of interpretation or these elements of appreciation. Literature, especially the novel and the play, are appreciated when we look at it in terms of its styles, in terms of its plot, in terms of its character traits and role, in terms of its themes, and probably the language that has been used, the diction that has been used to bring out the message. So as we begin our discussion on the possible questions that come in the national examination, that should form the foundation upon which we will build our discussion when it comes to issues of examination. I want to thank you very much for having given me audience, and I believe that what I have presented actually can help you when you're beginning to develop tests for your students or for your candidates. I'm a test developer and I understand some of these things. I've looked at what we call the table of specification when it comes to testing English paper 2. And those areas that I've talked about and the marks that I've given are very critical and should help you anytime you're developing a test, because you want the test that our candidates and our students take should be quality, so that they also compete out there with every other student or candidate effectively. Thank you very much, and may God bless you abundantly. Asante Nisa.